Welcome to the program. I'm Jeff Schechtman. Back in the 60s, there was that old expression that the personal was political. Today, it's also possible to say that the personal is professional. That ideas like project-based learning in our schools and a celebration and encouragement of young people doing the work they love combine these ideas as perhaps never before. And when this all happens in the service of science and discovery, it is perhaps even more magical. All of that takes us into the world of my guest, Hope Jahren. Hope Jahren received her Ph.D. at the University of California, Berkeley. She became the first woman ever to be promoted with tenure at Johns Hopkins within the Earth and Planetary Sciences Department. She was one of the builders of the isotope geobiology laboratories at the University of Hawaii, and she's been a recipient of 3 Fulbright Awards. She's also the author of a book that is considered by many one of the best books of the year. Her book, part memoir, part science, is Lab Girl, and it is my pleasure to welcome Hope Jahren here to the program. Hope, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
It's a delight to have you here. I want to talk first about you growing up and playing around and tinkering and falling in love in your father's laboratory. Talk a little about that.
Yeah, well, the book is called Lab Girl because my earliest memories as a very little girl are of being in my father's laboratory. He was a community college teacher. He taught for 42 years at a community college in rural Minnesota, and he taught all the sciences. He taught earth science and physics and chemistry and everything. And he would go to his laboratory in the evenings and get ready for the next day, fix all the instruments and get everything out and ready and run through the experiments. And my brothers and I would go with him, and I just loved it. I just loved being there. It was my favorite place. We got to play with all the stuff, but it wasn't really play. It was important stuff. And I just, from a very early age, I knew that when I grew up, I wanted to have my own lab, and I was going to do experiments in there with my friends, and it was going to be great. And I've just spent decades chasing that, and it's led to a really wonderful story, I think.
And this whole idea of falling in love with science, talk a little bit about that. Was it just the sense of the lab? Was it the idea of discovery? Talk a little bit more about what it was that you first began to understand as you were that little kid playing around in that lab.
I liked the fact that it was some place to go, that it was our special place, and it wasn't home, and it wasn't really a job, and it wasn't really school. It was the place where you did things, and I like the machines themselves. I like to work with my hands and take things apart and put them back together and create something with your hands. And I liked the fact that it was calm in there and long periods of, silence and thought, and it was home. It just felt good. And every time I walked away, the only thing I thought about was, when can I go back? And that's still how I feel. It stuck with me.
How did that juxtapose with learning in school in a more formal environment?
It was something different. School was just kind of something you had to get through in order to do what you really wanted to do, I thought. There's certain things that you can't learn from a book. There's certain you can't learn from being told. You have to figure it out yourself with your own hands and your own wondering. And I always loved, to work on something that nobody knew the answer to. And so I kept waiting, when are we going to do that? And in college you do these experiments that are scripted, and, the point is for you to get the answer that they know is the right answer or whatever. And it wasn't until I got to graduate school that it was all new territory. We were just doing something that nobody had done before. And, maybe it was something that most people would say that's not important or worth doing or whatever. But the fact was we were chipping away at the unknown. That was the really wonderful thing about it. So it takes a long time. It takes a long time to get to the place where you're supposed to be. But if you hang on to the part of it that feels so good. Gosh, is that close to what you were asking?
Absolutely. And one of the other things that it did is it gave you an appreciation for and an understanding for the natural world and how it related even to the rhythms and even how it was counter to the rhythms sometimes of the process of science.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think the first time that I really discovered that I wanted to study plants as my life's work was I was in Colorado, and I was working on these trees, and I was looking at the pits inside these little fruits. It's called the hackberry tree, and it's sort of like, it's much smaller, but it's sort of like a peach in that when you get down to where the seed is, it's surrounded by this shell, this really hard shell, if you think of a peach pit. And the reason that shell is hard is it's made out of rock, made out of the same kinds of rocks that you find in some places if you dig down to bedrock. And so I had set up monitoring of these trees, and we had some what turned out to be simplistic ideas of how the water in the environment and was influenced by the temperature of the climate, and it all interacted in these fruits to make this rock substance. And we assumed it would happen much the way this happens under our feet in the geological strata. And I remember working, getting all set up, and then that season, none of the trees that I was studying bore fruit or made those seeds. They just didn't, period. And there was no obvious reason why, and I still don't know exactly why that happened that year. But there was something about it. So it's a Shakespearean tragedy, right? But there's something about that drove home to me the point that this was a living organism, that this thing was not making seeds so that I could have a good experiment. It made seeds for other reasons. It was trying to stay alive. It was trying to negotiate the world. That it did things for reasons that I couldn't understand, and that just tasted like the most delicious scientific question I could think of. Why do plants do what they do? It's not about us. It's not about the science we know. It doesn't have to fit any of that stuff. It's its own world that is so different from ours, and the challenge of being able to see into it just a little. I knew that was a challenge that would last me my whole life, my whole career.
How did that help to shape how you see the world? Because it also shaped how you dealt with crises in your life over time.
Yes. I mean, I think our lives and what we know and what we study and what we think about and what we feel, it all starts to run together a little bit. And that's the interesting thing, and it's not supposed to be true for a scientist. We're supposed to be logical and clinical and supposed to be emotionless and But the reality is that science is done by people, and we are flawed people, and we are glorious people, and we love what we do, and we hate what we do. And so over the years, many, many years, the more I studied what it means to be alive, what it means to persist and survive. And when you think about how a plant does that, it inevitably leads to now and again thinking about how you do it and how the people around you do it and why. Why do we all do it? Why do all the organisms on the face of the earth try to stay alive? What is driving all of us? Where are we similar and where are we different? When you think for a living, it never goes away. The wheels are just constantly turning, and it's a wonderful thing.
How does it shape the science? How does it help the science in terms of thinking about it in the context of those broader questions, of those more kind of almost cosmological kind of questions in trying to understand the science?
I think there are different kinds of questions, and I think different researchers gravitate toward different kinds of questions. Some questions can be answered very quickly. Does this chemical react with this other chemical? You do the experiment, and it's either yes or no, and you get an answer, and you move on to the next thing. Not all problems can be solved that way. Some problems take years and years in order to crack open just a little bit of light into the subject. And the trick is, how do you keep going when you know that you're nowhere near the answer, and when you're not even sure that you're moving in the right direction for the answer? But I do believe it's if you don't stay on the path, then you have no chance of ever getting to any answer. And that's the kind of problems that we chose for whatever reason. I gravitated to those kinds of questions. But you also think about an oak tree, right? It puts out 100,000, 200,000 acorns every single year, and not all of those turn into trees, right? In fact, it does that in the hopes that one of them every 100 or 200 years will successfully grow into another tree, and thus keep claim of that patch of land for oakendom, right? So what does it mean to work so hard for so long with so little chance of success and have the reward be a fully formed oak tree, which doesn't occur any other way? How do you get something that lives for hundreds of years and is the biggest thing on the planet and is just majestic and incredible? There's no other way to get an oak tree but to make all those millions of acorns. And I always felt like, if a tree can stand there and keep that faith for that long, then we can do this for one more month. We can stretch the nickels into dollars. We'll find a better way. It will somehow be here at this time next year. And it wasn't a direct comparison in my mind, but there was something about, I think, the way it fed back into both parts of my life that kept us going all those years.
Does it worry you that we live in this age, particularly for young people, of kind of instant gratification, and that in some ways it runs counter to what we're talking about?
I think that that's an important message that we have the capability to give, is that it's okay not to know if you're on the right path. The important thing is to keep walking. And to find joy in the movement, to find joy in every step, and to find joy in the fact that you are moving and that you can move and how it feels to move. I think we put so much pressure on the destination, and that's never something you can see until hindsight. It takes so long for your life to turn into something, but how to keep that, how to keep energized in the meantime, how to turn the wheels every day and feed the soul while that turning is happening. That's where our focus needs to be, because we don't have the power to tell young people where they're going to end up, and we shouldn't have the power to tell them where they should end up, but we have the power to tell them that they are made to move forward, and that if they trust that movement, it will lead them to where they're supposed to go. I think we have responsibilities about the messages that we give.
How much of understanding the natural world and having an appreciation for it is part of being able to get that message?
What I've seen, what I've seen in my own life is that the more people know about the world, the more they feel like they're part of it. And so I've seen how learning one tree from another, learning how to tell apart 20 different trees that you find in your neighborhood, I've seen how that can change a person into somebody who feels like they know something, can walk down the street and say, oh yeah, I recognize this and I recognize that, and I'm part of this world and I'm made to know things about it. And I've seen how that can feed the soul and help people grow and fill this longing that we have for meaning, that people try to fill other ways, by chasing money and power. And I try to encourage people that, chasing education and chasing chasing knowing things and going overboard in your love for learning is acceptable is an acceptable path. And it's one that I can recommend without reservations because I've seen so much good come from it.
When you talk to young people today and you talk about the things that we're talking about, when you put this message out there, what do you sense from them? What do you get from young people today?
I think, gosh, that's a difficult question. I sense that we all have so much anxiety over the things we can't control that we forget to take joy and satisfaction in the things we can do and the things we can control and the things that we can make. That I have control over what I do today. Will I go to the park? Will I stay inside? Will I meet somebody new? Will I try to alleviate somebody else's pain? And that our short-term goals and the fulfillment we get from them add up to our lives. And so I think maybe our young people think too much about the big picture. And I try to get them to celebrate the little picture, stand back and say, remember how to use your hands, remember how to touch the bark and look up and just be outside and use your five senses. What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What does this look like? And just reminding people to try to awaken things they naturally did as children. I've seen that. I've seen that lead to a good day, and a lot of good days in a row is a good life, right?
Hope Jahren, her book is Lab Girl. Hope, I thank you so much for spending time with us today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We'll take a break. I'll be right back.